Good afternoon. It's a real honour to follow my brothers Sunil and Abdullah. Thank you so much for coming to share your stories with us and for all that you do. Your compassion, your courage, your faith, your determination are an absolute inspiration, and we're so grateful. Thank you. The message of this year's research from Open Doors is that the reach and intensity of persecution of Christians around the world is increasing. When I stood here last year, we were talking about the 50 most dangerous countries on the World Watch List, representing 245 million Christians. This year, they represent 260 million Christians. That's an increase of 6% in 12 months. 1 in 8 Christians around the world faces persecution, either the very real experience of violence and oppression, the smash and the squeeze, if you will, which Sunil and Abdullah have been talking about, or the fear of it. 1 in 8 Christians around the world. And this year, 45 of the 50 countries on the list are experiencing very high or extreme levels of persecution. Last year, that number was only 40. That's an increase in intensity of 10% in the last year. Bangladesh is one of the countries that has jumped up the list from 48 to 38. In theory, Bangladesh is a secular country, but actually it's 90% Muslim, which means that Christian converts in particular receive a lot of persecution, and sadly the persecution comes mainly from their nearest and dearest, because it brings so much shame and dishonour on the family if somebody converts to Christianity. I was in Bangladesh last year and I met a man, let's call him Abi, who told me that when his family had discovered not only that he'd become a Christian, but had married a Christian woman, his father and elder brother, both of whom were Islamic priests, gathered 500 villagers and went to his in-laws' house and dragged Abi out of the house. They took him back to the family home, they chained him overnight, and they told him that the following day they were going to kill him and hang his body in a public place as a witness to everybody in the village. That is the sort of persecution people are facing, Christians are facing, in countries where, frankly, you just wouldn't expect it. Throughout the past year, many vulnerable Christian communities have experienced grand-scale destabilisation through attacks specifically targeted to strike fear into the wider Christian community, forcing them to renounce their faith, damaging their resilience, and completely destroying any possibility they might have to have a positive impact on their communities. So take, for example, the Easter Day Sunday bombings in Sri Lanka, which Sunil has already alluded to. The regular occurrence of gunmen opening fire on churches in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso hasn't been on the list before. This year it's shot up to number 28, straight in at number 28. And my colleagues in West Africa tell me it's very unusual to see persecution go from minimal to extreme so fast. That's happened in Burkina Faso again in the last year. And this year Niger is back on the list at number 50, and Cameroon joins the list for the first time. So West Africa is seeing a dramatic increase in Islamic terrorism. And then, of course, we know of the systematic attacks on Christian villages in northern Nigeria and the Middle Belt by Fulani herdsmen and Boko Haram. The number of deaths of Christians this year was highest in northern Nigeria. 1,350 Christians were murdered there. All of this confirms that in the countries on the World Watch List, in those 50 countries, Christians are massively at risk. And the truth is that if you're already vulnerable, if you're a woman, if you're an older person, if you're living with a disability, if you're an untouchable or a Dalit, and you live in one of those 50 countries, and you're a Christian, your vulnerability exponentially increases. That's why we would like to see the UK government, the Foreign Office, DFID, see faith as a vulnerability alongside the usual suspects when they're doing needs assessments to determine where aid and humanitarian support should go. As we've heard from Sunil and Pastor Abdullah, church leaders and members of church communities are providing amazing support when the worst happens. And that's really the second thing we'd like to see, is funding going direct to faith actors in the field, who are not only the first responders, but are the people who stay long-term alongside the members of their communities, Christian and non-Christian, providing much-needed help and support, restoration, rebuilding, trauma counselling, the opportunity to get a job, to build a business, as Abdullah was saying in Syria. So what can you do to help? First of all, we would really like to urge all of you who are parliamentarians to keep the persecution of Christians at the top of the government's agenda. We've been so encouraged by the Bishop of Truro's report into UK support for persecuted Christians, by the Prime Minister's message at Christmas, by the fact that all the manifestos during the election mentioned freedom of religion or belief. Please keep talking about it. Please keep pushing. Please push for faith to be recognised as a vulnerability. And please push for funding for faith actors in the field in terms of long-term sustainability, restoration and development. It's faith actors who can really, really make a difference. And finally, after Brexit, we will be getting into trade talks. Many of the countries, two in particular, India and China, that the government is likely to be talking to, are right there in the top 50 on the list, in the top 25 actually. And we would like to see human rights, and particularly freedom of religion or belief, which is after all, Article 18 of the UN Declaration on Human Rights, raised as part of those conversations. As Teresa has said, if you look at page 31 of the report, there's a fuller list of our recommendations. I'd really like to thank the Right Honourable Teresa Villiers for hosting us again. It's always such a delight to be here. We feel like we're in sort of hallowed halls when we're in the House of Commons. It's great, thank you so much. And thank you also to Raymond Chishti, who is about to follow me on the stage. We're so encouraged to see the role of the Prime Minister's Special Envoy on freedom of religion or belief continue, and we are really looking forward to the implementation of Bishop of Truro's recommendations. And thank you so much to all of you, for all of those of you who have walked with us and persecuted Christians over many years, and for those of you who are going to begin to do so from today.